Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night with the uneasy sense that you were not alone? The room was silent, the shadows still, and yet the air felt thick, charged, as if something unseen was watching you from the corner. Your rational mind told you it was nothing, but another part of you, an older, deeper part, was not so sure. This sensation is not new. It is not modern. It is ancient. It is the echo of a fear that has haunted humanity since the first fires were lit in the darkness of primeval forests. A fear that the night was not empty, that something always lurked just beyond the reach of the flame. The Slavs, like many peoples, gave this fear a face, a name, a story. They spoke of the Striga, a cursed child, unwanted and unloved, who rose from her grave as a beast with claws and hunger for human flesh. They whispered about the Rusalki, a drowned maiden betrayed in life who lured men into rivers and lakes with her haunting voice. They feared the Upir, a restless revenant, not unlike a vampire who returned from the grave to drain the life of the living. These were not random tales of horror. They were mirrors. Each creature was born not from imagination alone, but from human wounds. The Striga was the embodiment of neglect and cruelty toward children. The Rusalki was the grief of women betrayed and discarded. The Upir was the refusal of injustice to stay buried. The Noonwraith was the terror of the land itself, punishing those who disrespected the rhythms of nature. Andrzej Sapkowski, in writing The Witcher, did not invent these monsters. He resurrected them. He placed them in a fictional world, yes, but their roots are older than any single story. They belong to the collective memory of the Slavic people, to centuries of whispered warnings and fireside tales. Yet what makes The Witcher extraordinary is that it never stops at the surface. Geralt of Rivia does not simply slay monsters because they are evil. In fact, the closer you look, the less the word evil applies at all. The Striga that Geralt faces is not evil. She is cursed, trapped, the victim of her parents' sins. The Rusalki is not evil. She is grief incarnate. Even the most grotesque beasts often carry a story of sorrow or injustice. That is why The Witcher speaks so powerfully to us today. In Tolkien's Middle-earth, evil has a name and a face, Sauron, the Dark Lord. But in Sapkowski's world, evil is not a single figure to be destroyed. It is the accumulation of human choices, of greed, betrayal, neglect and fear. Monsters are symptoms, not sources. And sometimes the humans are far worse than the creatures they fear. But here is the crucial insight. This is not just a narrative device. This is myth. This is what myths have always done. Carl Jung once said that myths are the dreams of the collective unconscious. They are the coded language of the psyche, the way humanity has always processed its shadows. And shadows, in Jung's sense, are the parts of ourselves we repress, deny, or refuse to see. The Striga is the shadow of neglect. The Rusalki is the shadow of betrayal. The Upir is the shadow of injustice. The Noonwraith is the shadow of exhaustion, of forgetting the limits of the human body. Each one reflects something human that has gone unacknowledged, something pushed so far into the dark that it returns with claws. When Geralt draws his sword, part of us longs for the simplicity of believing that monsters can be cleanly slain. But Sapkowski never lets us rest in that illusion. Sometimes the silver sword is not enough. Sometimes the monster can only be freed by breaking the curse, or by listening to its story, or by realizing that the true monster was never the creature at all. And this is why The Witcher resonates far beyond Slavic lands, because though the names may be foreign, the truths are not. Every culture has its cursed child, its drowned maiden, its restless dead. Every society has its shadows, and every individual, if they look closely enough, will find the same archetypes stirring within themselves. Think about it. Haven't you ever buried anger so deeply that it seemed to grow sharp teeth in the dark? Haven't you ever carried grief so heavy that it haunted you like a song you couldn't escape? Haven't you ever seen injustice so unbearable that it seemed the dead themselves might rise to demand retribution? That is the essence of Slavic myth. That is the essence of the Witcher. The monsters are not out there. They are inside us. They are the stories we tell to make sense of what we fear in ourselves. And so the opening lesson is stark, but vital. When you encounter a monster in these tales, you are not looking at fantasy. You are looking into a mirror. The Witcher's world invites us to confront the same truth that myths have always whispered. You cannot kill your shadows by denying them. You cannot escape them by pretending they don't exist. You must face them, understand them, and sometimes, if you are brave enough, you must have mercy on them. This is where our journey begins. Not with steel and sorcery, but with a mirror. Not with a hero and a villain, but with the recognition that what we fear most is already within us. Every culture has a boundary, a place where the known world ends and the unknown begins. For the ancient Greeks, it was the sea, an endless expanse beyond the sight of land. For the Norse, it was the ice and the far north, the realm of frost giants and chaos. For the Slavs, it was the forest. The forest was not just a collection of trees, it was alive. It breathed. It listened. The line between village and wilderness was more than geography. It was metaphysical. Inside the village, there was order, fire, hearth, family, ritual. Beyond the fence, the forest waited with its shadows and voices. It was the realm of danger, temptation, transformation. In Slavic myth, the forest was the place where spirits walked and humans lost themselves. It was the home of the Leshys, the forest guardian, sometimes protector, sometimes trickster, sometimes predator. Travelers spoke of being led astray by the Leshys' laughter, of wandering in circles until they collapsed. And yet the same spirit could guide a respectful hunter safely back to the village. The lesson was clear. How you entered the forest determined what the forest gave back to you. But the forest was not only home to the Leshys, it was haunted by the noon wraiths, drifting pale women who shimmered between the stalks of grain. It concealed Rusalki, waiting near streams and ponds. It was filled with the whispers of domovoi, household spirits who sometimes left their homes to walk in the wild. Every spirit, every demon, every guardian was connected to the woods. Why? Because the forest was the symbol of the unknown. When a young man or woman left the safety of the settlement, they entered a realm without paths. Time lost its meaning. The familiar became strange. In mythic terms, they crossed into the unconscious. And here is where the Witcher draws so much of its power. Geralt's world is surrounded by forests. He steps into them again and again, not just physically, but spiritually. The forest is where he meets monsters, but also where he meets the truth about himself. The pathless woods reflect the moral landscape of his life, confusing, shifting, without clear boundaries between good and evil. Consider the episode of the Leshys in Sapkowski's stories and later adaptations. The Leshys is not a beast to be slain, but a force to be reckoned with. It represents the raw autonomy of nature. Geralt cannot simply impose human order upon it. He must negotiate with it, respect it, or risk being destroyed. Isn't that the same tension we face in our modern lives? The forest today may not be filled with spirits, but we still encounter forces larger than ourselves, climate, technology, fate, that cannot be mastered, only respected. The forest also has another role. It is the place of initiation. In countless folktales, a child wanders into the woods and returns changed. Sometimes they bring back treasure, sometimes scars, sometimes they never return at all. The journey into the forest is the journey into adulthood, into selfhood. You leave behind the safety of the hearth, and in the silence between the trees, you meet your shadow. For the Slavs, this was not metaphorical, it was lived. The forest was both survival and death. It gave wood for the fire, game for the pot, herbs for healing. but it also gave wolves, bears, and disease. It could shelter you or swallow you. To step into it was to risk transformation, one way or another. Isn't that what we still feel today? The forest may be a new job, a new relationship, a leap into the unknown. It may be grief, illness, or love. We step into it unsure if we will return the same. And like the ancients, we sense that the outcome depends not only on what lies in the forest, but on what lies in us. In Jungian terms, the forest is the archetype of the unconscious. It is the place where the ego loses control, where the rational mind cannot map the territory. There the self, larger, deeper, more mysterious, dwells. When you dream of wandering in a dark wood, it is not coincidence. It is your psyche telling you that you are on the edge of transformation. This is why the forest in The Witcher is never just scenery. It is a stage, a mirror. Every time Geralt steps under its canopy, he confronts more than monsters. He confronts uncertainty, fate, and the truth that the world cannot be neatly divided. And every time we enter the story with him, we are reminded of our own journeys into the unknown. The forest is not merely a setting, it is a teacher. It says, "Respect me, or I will consume you. Face me, and I will reveal who you are." And if you think this belongs only to myth, ask yourself, why do we still feel uneasy in the woods at night? Why does the silence of trees stir our primal fear, even when we know there are no wolves, no spirits? The answer is simple, because the forest is inside us. It is the part of ourselves we cannot tame, the part that resists order, the part that whispers in dreams and stirs in our bones. The village is your conscious life, the routines, the rules, the roles you play. The forest is everything else. The grief you've never spoken, the desires you hide, the fears you repress. When you walk into the forest, whether in myth, in story, or in life, you are not entering an external place. You are entering your own soul. And this is why Slavic myth and The Witcher still resonate, because all of us, whether we admit it or not, are walking toward the trees. All of us stand at the boundary, where the known ends and the unknown begins. And all of us must decide how we will meet the Leshys when we hear his laughter in the dark. When most people hear the word monster, they imagine something alien, a creature with no place in our world, born only to terrify, to kill, to destroy. But the truth of myth and the truth of The Witcher is far more unsettling. Monsters are not alien. They are familiar. They are human pain dressed in claws and teeth. This is perhaps the most distinctive feature of Slavic mythology. Unlike the dragons of Western Europe or the titans of Greece, Slavic monsters are rarely grand embodiments of cosmic chaos. They are intimate. They are personal. They are what happens when something human goes wrong. Take the Striga. In The Witcher, Geralt's first great trial is to face her. A king's daughter cursed before birth dies and rises as a beast. With her long talons, her hunger for blood, and her animal shrieks, she terrorizes the kingdom. But her story is not one of evil, it is one of neglect. In Sapkowski's tale, she is born of resentment, of betrayal, of a crime within the family. She is, quite literally, the sins of the parents visited upon the child. This mirrors the mythic logic of the Slavic world. The Striga is not a demon from hell. She is the abandoned child, the unblessed infant, the life that was never allowed to flourish. And so she returns, twisted and hungry, to demand what she was denied. What makes her terrifying is not her monstrous form. It is the recognition that her curse began with human cruelty. Now consider the Rusalka. In English, she is often compared to a siren, but the resemblance is only partial. The Rusalka is not a temptress by choice. She is a drowned maiden, often a woman betrayed by her lover or a girl who died before marriage. Her laughter and her song are not seductions, they are the echoes of her grief. She lures men into the water not because she desires them, but because her own story ended in betrayal and drowning. The Rusalka is tragedy personified. She reminds us of the pain of broken promises, of love turned to poison, of lives cut short before their time. In the world of The Witcher, she is not a fairy tale villain. She is an accusation, a voice rising from the river. Look what you did. Look what you ignored. Then there is the Upir, a word that might sound unfamiliar, but whose shape we know well. The Upir is the ancestor of the vampire myths. But unlike the elegant aristocrats of Gothic literature, the Upir is closer to the soil. He is the restless corpse of someone who died wrongly, murdered, cheated, denied justice. He rises from the grave not out of lust for power, but because his story is unfinished. The Upir does not let the living rest because he himself was denied rest. What unites these three figures, the Striga, the Rusalka, the Upir, is that they are not embodiments of random malice. They are wounds given flesh. They are the return of what was broken, denied, or forgotten. And here is where Sapkowski's genius becomes clear. In most fantasy, the hero slays the beast and restores order. But Geralt rarely has that luxury. When he faces the Striga, he realizes she is not only a danger, but also an innocent twisted by the cruelty of others. To simply kill her would be to repeat the crime that made her what she is. And so he takes another path. He endures the night, restraining her without killing her, until the curse breaks and the girl is restored. This act sets the tone for all of The Witcher. Monsters are never only monsters, they are stories, traumas, consequences. To deal with them, you must listen as much as you must fight. But let's pause and ask, why does this resonate with us so deeply? Why do these myths and these tales stir something in the pit of our stomachs? Because we know what it means to be wounded, because we too carry shadows. Think of the Striga in psychological terms. She's the inner child that was neglected, the pain we bury so deep it twists into rage. Think of the Rusalka. She is the sorrow of betrayal, the heartbreak we never truly resolve, that haunts us in songs and memories. Think of the Upir. He is the injustice we witnessed or suffered, the wrong that refuses to die no matter how much dirt we heap upon it. Slavic myth externalized these experiences. It gave them faces, forms, voices, and by doing so, it allowed people to confront them. To tell a story of the Striga was to acknowledge that neglect has consequences. To whisper about the Rusalka was to warn that betrayal is never without cost. To fear the Upir was to admit that justice denied will not stay buried. This is what Jung meant when he said that myths are the dreams of the collective unconscious. They are the psyche speaking to itself. They are humanity's way of making inner wounds visible. And Sapkowski, in adapting these myths into his world, gave us a way to feel this again, not as dusty folklore, but as living story. The brilliance of The Witcher is that it forces us to see the humanity in monstrosity and the monstrosity in humanity. The villagers who curse a child create the Striga. The men who betray women create the Rusalka. The corrupt society that denies justice creates the Upir. We are not innocent bystanders. We are participants in the making of monsters. And perhaps that is the most frightening truth of all. Because if monsters are born from human wounds, then we are all capable of creating them. Every time we ignore suffering, every time we choose cruelty, every time we turn away from injustice, we sow the seeds of another Striga, another Rusalka, another Upir. This is why The Witcher feels so modern, even though it draws on myths centuries old. Because the pattern has not changed. We still create monsters when we neglect, betray, and oppress. They may not have claws or glowing eyes, but they haunt us just as surely. In broken families, in cycles of violence, in the injustices that return generation after generation. And so the myth remains relevant, not because we still fear the forest at night, but because we still fear the shadows in ourselves and in our societies. The Striga, the Rusalka, the Upir, they are not relics of a superstitious past. They are warnings. They tell us what you deny will return. What you bury will rise. What you wound will one day knock at your door with claws. In the end, the lesson is as clear as it is terrifying. Monsters are not accidents. They are messages, and if we dare to listen, we may find they are speaking directly to us. When we think of monsters, we often imagine predators, beasts with teeth and hunger. But some of the most haunting figures in Slavic myth are not predators at all. They are spirits. They are the personification of nature itself, unpredictable, beautiful, indifferent, and at times merciless. Two of the most powerful among them are the Leshys and the Noonwraith. The Leshys, known as the Lord of the Forest, is one of the most enduring figures in Slavic folklore. He is a shapeshifter, sometimes appearing as a towering man with bark for skin and hair like moss, sometimes shrinking to the size of a blade of grass. His voice can echo like thunder through the trees or whisper just behind your ear. His role is ambivalent. He is not good, but neither is he evil. He is the embodiment of the forest's will. To hunters who respect the woods, he may serve as a guide, leading them to game or back to the village. To those who desecrate the forest, he is a trickster, luring them deeper and deeper until they are lost forever. The lesson is clear. The Leshys enforces balance. He ensures that the forest is not plundered, that its mysteries are not taken for granted. He is a mythic reminder that nature does not belong to us. We belong to it. In The Witcher, we see this archetype reimagined. The Leshys becomes a terrifying opponent, a monster of root and shadow, a hunter as relentless as any man. But even then, his nature remains consistent with the old myths. He is a force of the forest. He punishes those who enter without respect. Fighting him is not simply a battle against claws and vines. It is a confrontation with the truth that the world itself resists domination. And isn't this tension as modern as ever? Today, we no longer fear being lost in primeval forests, but we face climate change, deforestation, and a planet that pushes back against exploitation. The Leshys still haunts us, not in the shape of a moss-covered giant, but in wildfires, storms, and ecological collapse. His lesson is the same: respect the forest or be destroyed by it. Then there is the Noonwraith, Powudnika. Unlike the Leshys, who embodies the living forest, the Noonwraith arises from the fields. She appears in the heat of midday, shimmering like a pale woman dressed in white, sometimes carrying a sickle. For peasants who labored under the burning sun, she was the explanation for sudden strokes, fainting, or exhaustion. To encounter her was to collapse, to fall into delirium, sometimes to die. But her myth carries a deeper resonance. The Noonwraith is not only about heat stroke, she is the personification of overwork, of breaking the body against the demands of survival. She is the reminder that nature's cycles must be respected, not just by worship, but by rest. Work at the wrong hour, ignore the balance of day and night, and the Noonwraith will come. Her story also often ties her to tragedy. Many tales say the Noonwraith was once a young bride who died before her wedding, her spirit lingering in the fields. Her drifting presence is both a warning and a lament, a reminder of lives interrupted and the cost of ignoring the rhythms of the earth. In The Witcher, Noonwraiths are given eerie form. They glide above the fields, shimmering and wailing, bound to the places where they died. They are not simply monsters to be cut down. They are women, trapped by memory and grief. To banish a Noonwraith, Geralt often must perform a ritual, lay the spirit to rest, or uncover the truth of her story. Violence alone is not enough. Understanding is required, and here we see the brilliance of myth once again. Both the Leshys and the Noonwraith remind us that the world is not neutral. It responds, it holds memory, it enforces balance. Ignore this, and you pay the price. In psychological terms, these spirits represent forces beyond our control. The Leshys is the unconscious wilderness. the untamed instincts, the primal drives, the part of us that resists civilization. The noon wraith is the cost of ignoring our limits, the shadow of exhaustion, the grief of unacknowledged loss. Together, they show that not all monsters come from betrayal or neglect. Some come from our relationship with the world itself. And so the forest and the field become mirrors of the soul. To meet the Leshys is to confront your arrogance, your assumption that you can dominate the wild within and without. To meet the noon wraith is to face your own fragility, your mortality, your tendency to overreach until your body collapses. Sapkowski understood this. His Witcher stories are filled with battles that are not just against creatures, but against consequences. Each encounter is symbolic. Each spirit forces both Geralt and us to remember that life is a negotiation with forces larger than ourselves. In our own time, we may no longer speak of the Leshys or the Noonwraith, but we still meet them. The Leshys appears every time a storm uproots cities, every time nature reminds us of its strength. The Noonwraith appears every time someone works themselves to exhaustion, every time grief lingers unspoken in the heat of ordinary life. The ancients named them. We have forgotten the names, but the truths remain. And perhaps this is why The Witcher feels so alive. Because when Geralt faces the Leshys, we feel our own struggle with forces beyond control. When he faces the Noonwraith, we remember our own griefs, our own exhaustion, the weight of unhealed sorrow. In the end, these myths are not just about spirits in the woods or fields, they are about us. They say, respect the wild within you, respect your limits. If you do not, the spirits will remind you, and their reminders are never gentle. If you strip away the monsters, the sorcery, and the medieval trappings, what remains at the core of The Witcher is not a story about magic. It is a story about identity. And at the center of that story stands Geralt of Rivia, a man who is, in every sense, an outsider. Geralt is a witcher, mutated in childhood through brutal alchemy, subjected to poisons, trials, and surgeries that would kill most. His hair is white, his eyes cat-like, his reflexes superhuman. He is no longer fully human, but neither is he beast. He is something in between, forever caught in liminality. This state of being between defines Geralt's existence. The villagers he protects fear him, spitting at his feet, calling him freak and mutant. The nobility he serves look down on him as a mercenary, a disposable blade. Even among witchers, his path is solitary, his choices setting him apart. Wherever he goes, he is useful, but rarely welcome. He belongs everywhere and nowhere. This archetype is ancient. Myths across cultures are filled with figures who live at the edges, who are not fully of one world or another. In Jungian psychology, they are expressions of the wounded healer, those who, by virtue of their suffering and transformation, gain the power to heal or protect others. Consider Chiron in Greek myth, the centaur who was wise and skilled in medicine, yet wounded eternally by a poisoned arrow. He could heal others, but not himself. Or think of shamans in countless indigenous traditions, who often became healers after surviving an illness or trauma that set them apart from their community. To stand between worlds, to be marked by pain, is to gain access to truths hidden from the unscarred. Geralt embodies this perfectly. His mutations, his scars, his isolation, they strip him of belonging, but they give him the power to walk the line between human and monster. He understands both sides, and therefore he is the one who can mediate. He slays monsters not only with steel, but with knowledge born of his liminality. And yet Sapkowski never lets us forget the cost. Geralt is not a triumphant hero. He is weary, he is scarred, he is haunted by the knowledge that no matter how many lives he saves, he will never truly be accepted. This tension defines him. He longs for connection, for love, for a place to rest, yet every path leads him back to solitude. Here, again, myth speaks directly to us. Because who among us has not felt like an outsider? Who has not felt the sting of being needed, but not wanted, useful, but unloved? Geralt's story resonates because it is our story magnified. We may not slay Leshys or Strigas, but we know the ache of standing at the margins, of wondering if there is a place where we truly belong. The archetype of the outsider carries both pain and possibility. Pain, because exclusion cuts deep. Possibility, because standing outside allows for perspective. Geralt sees what others cannot. He recognizes that humans are often more monstrous than the beasts they fear. He understands that neutrality is an illusion, that every choice carries weight, even the choice to stay out of it. In this, Geralt also embodies another archetype, the liminal guardian. Like Hermes between Olympus and the underworld, or Odin wandering disguised among men, Geralt stands on thresholds. He patrols the borders between village and wilderness, human and inhuman, justice and cruelty. His presence reminds us that boundaries are fragile, that what we call civilization rests precariously on the edge of the unknown. But perhaps most profoundly, Geralt is also the everyman in exile. He is not chosen by destiny in the traditional sense. He has no divine parentage, no cosmic mission. He is a man made into something else and forced to survive in a world that mistrusts him. His strength comes not from prophecy, but from endurance. And this is why, paradoxically, Geralt is more relatable than many traditional heroes. Superman is born powerful. Aragorn is heir to the throne. Achilles is blessed by the gods. Geralt is mutilated into power. He pays for every gift with blood and alienation. His heroism is not the birthright of nobility, but the hard survival of someone who has suffered. This too reflects Slavic myth. Unlike some traditions that glorify gods and demigods, Slavic stories are often about ordinary people caught in extraordinary circumstances. The hero is rarely blessed. More often he is cursed, tested, wounded. He succeeds not because fate smiles upon him, but because he endures. Geralt embodies that spirit. He is not good in the moralistic sense. He is not perfect. He is weary, cynical, sometimes cruel. But he continues. He continues because he knows someone must walk between worlds, someone must face the monsters, someone must bear the exile so that others can remain in their villages, pretending the world is simple. And here lies the final truth of Geralt's archetype. He is not only the outsider, he is the mirror of our own hidden longing. The longing to believe that our scars, our exile, our feeling of being different are not meaningless. That they too can give us power, that they too can make us guardians at the thresholds of our own lives. The myth of Geralt of Rivia whispers to us, your wounds do not disqualify you. Your difference is not your downfall. In your exile lies your strength. In your shadow lies your gift. And though you may never fully belong, perhaps belonging was never the point. Perhaps the point is to walk the edge, to carry the sword, and to remind the world that what stands between order and chaos is often not a king or a god, but an exile with scars. If Geralt of Rivia is the archetype of the exiled healer, the scarred outsider who walks between worlds, then Yennefer and Ciri embody another essential dimension of myth, the power and mystery of the feminine. In much of traditional myth, women appear in roles that are deeply archetypal: the maiden, the mother, the witch, the goddess, the temptress, the oracle. They are rarely neutral figures. They are embodiments of forces larger than life, shaping destiny as much through desire and grief as through prophecy and command. In The Witcher, Andrzej Sapkowski draws on this mythic legacy but refuses to flatten his female characters into stereotypes. Instead, he gives them complexity, agency, pain, and contradiction. Yennefer of Vengerberg and Cirilla Fiona, Ellen Rhiannon, Ciri, stand as two of the most powerful figures in the saga, and each represents a different aspect of the archetypal feminine, one shaped by the hunger for power and belonging, the other by the weight of destiny. Yennefer is perhaps one of the most compelling figures in modern fantasy. Born with a twisted spine, mocked and abused, she begins her life not as a goddess, but as an outcast. Her transformation into a sorceress is both a triumph and a curse. Magic reshapes her body, gifting her beauty, power, and status, but it also comes at a cost. She can no longer bear children. This paradox defines her, outwardly powerful, inwardly scarred. She embodies the archetype of the witch, a figure feared and desired, demonized and revered. Historically, women with knowledge, independence, or power were often labeled witches, a label that carried both awe and threat. Yennefer inherits this legacy. She is brilliant, ambitious, sharp-tongued, often cruel, yet capable of deep love and sacrifice. Her story resonates because it reveals the truth about power. It does not erase wounds, it amplifies them. Yennefer's desire to have a child, to nurture, to belong, becomes all the more poignant because her transformation has denied her that possibility. She is both the archetypal sorceress and the deeply human woman who longs for what she cannot have. In mythology, she mirrors figures like Baba Yaga, the witch of the woods, dangerous, wise, ambivalent. But Yennefer is no one-dimensional crone. She is closer to the goddesses of love and war, Ishtar, Aphrodite, Freyja, whose powers were immense, but whose lives were marked by longing, jealousy, and grief. She represents the truth that power and vulnerability are never far apart. In Geralt's world, Yennefer is both partner and mirror. She exposes his own wounds, challenges his neutrality, draws him into bonds he cannot escape. Their love is stormy, destructive, passionate, healing, never simple. And perhaps that is why it feels real. Because love, especially between wounded people, is never simple. If Yennefer embodies the archetype of the witch, Ciri embodies another ancient figure, the child of destiny. From the moment of her birth, her life is marked by prophecy. She carries elder blood in her veins, a lineage of immense magical potential. She is pursued by kings, emperors, and sorcerers, each wanting to control her future. But Ciri is not simply a symbol. She is a girl growing into a woman under impossible pressure. Her childhood is shattered by war and loss. She trains as a witcher under Geralt, learns sorcery under Yennefer, wanders through deserts, battles, and dimensions. She is hunted, captured, broken, and remade. Her archetype is as old as myth itself. Think of Oedipus, fated to kill his father and marry his mother. Think of Moses, drawn from the water to lead his people. Think of Perseus or Theseus, children whose birth was foretold, whose lives carried the weight of destiny. The child of destiny is both a promise and a threat. They are savior and destroyer in one. Ciri embodies this paradox. She is the hope of a new future, the seed of change. But she is also feared as a potential cataclysm, a force that could shatter the world. Her very existence destabilizes kingdoms because prophecy has already marked her as pivotal. What makes Ciri so compelling is that Sapkowski never lets her be just a vessel for prophecy. She is stubborn, reckless, compassionate, traumatized. She is a girl forced to become more than she should have to be. And in this, she reflects the universal human struggle, the tension between who we are and what the world demands we become. Yennefer and Ciri together embody the tension between two powerful archetypes, the witch and the child of destiny. One is marked by transformation, sacrifice, and the hunger for belonging. The other is marked by prophecy, possibility, and the burden of the future. But their stories are not isolated. They intersect. Yennefer becomes a mother figure to Ciri, even as her own womb was denied to her. Ciri becomes the child Yennefer cannot have, and in turn, Yennefer becomes the guide Ciri desperately needs. Their bond is one of the most moving aspects of the Witcher saga, precisely because it grows out of wounds. This reflects an ancient truth. Myths are rarely about perfection. They are about brokenness, about how bonds form through suffering, how archetypes overlap and transform. Yennefer is both witch and mother. Ciri is both child and warrior. Together, they show that identity is not singular, but layered, shifting, contradictory. So why do Yennefer and Ciri matter to us beyond the lore of Sapkowski's world? Because they reflect struggles we know too well. Yennefer shows us that power does not erase longing, that beauty does not heal pain, that ambition and love can coexist in destructive, messy ways. Ciri shows us what it feels like to be crushed by expectation, to carry a future we did not choose, to stumble through trauma while trying to find who we really are. These are not distant archetypes, they are intimate. The witch and the child of destiny live in us, just as surely as the outsider does. Every time we chase power to hide our wounds, every time we long for what is denied, Yennefer stirs within us. Every time we feel the weight of expectation, every time we struggle between who we are and who we are told to be, Ciri walks beside us. And this is what myth does best. It turns personal pain into universal truth. It shows us that we are not alone in our struggles, that the patterns we live have been lived before, told before, sung before. Yennefer and Ciri are not simply characters, they are archetypes, reborn. They are parts of ourselves, given voice. In the end, the saga of Yennefer and Ciri is not just about magic or prophecy. It is about what it means to live with wounds, with longing, with the weight of the future. It is about how we navigate power and vulnerability, destiny and choice. And if we listen carefully, we may hear what the myths have been whispering all along. Our stories, no matter how broken, are never meaningless. They are part of something older, larger, more mysterious. Yennefer teaches us that our wounds can coexist with our strength. Ciri teaches us that even under the burden of destiny, we are still free to choose. Together, they remind us that the feminine in myth is never only passive, it is power, mystery, transformation. And in their bond, forged through pain and love, we glimpse a truth as old as myth itself. The future is never carried alone. Every mythology has at least one great cosmic rivalry. In Norse myth, it is the endless struggle between the gods of Asgard and the giants of Jotunheim. In Greek myth, it is the Olympians overthrowing the Titans. In Christianity, it is God and Satan locked in eternal opposition. For the Slavs, the central mythic conflict was the battle between Perun, the thunder god, and Veles, the chthonic god of earth, water, and the underworld. Their struggle was not only cosmic, it was cyclical, woven into the rhythms of nature itself. Perun was the god of thunder, lightning, and storms. His weapons were arrows of fire, bolts that split the sky and shattered trees. He was associated with mountains, oak trees, and the axe or hammer that symbolized his power. In many ways, he resembles Thor or Zeus, but his role in Slavic cosmology was distinct. Perun was not simply a warrior, he was the guarantor of order, the guardian of oaths, the enforcer of justice. He lived in the heavens, watching from above, his lightning striking down liars and oathbreakers. His domain was law, structure, clarity. Opposite him stood Veles, god of the underworld, of cattle, of wealth, of rivers, of magic. Where Perun ruled the sky, Veles slithered across the earth, often imagined as a serpent or dragon. He was associated with chaos, trickery, shape-shifting. Unlike Perun's realm of order, Veles was fluid, ambiguous, fertile, dangerous. But Veles was not evil. In fact, he was necessary. He guarded the realm of the dead, watched over herds, and brought prosperity. He represented the untamed forces of the world, both creative and destructive. Without him, there would be no balance. The mythic cycle told that Veles would climb from the underworld into Perun's domain, stealing cattle, wealth, or people. Perun would respond with thunder and lightning, chasing Veles across the sky, striking trees, mountains and rivers until the serpent was driven back underground. Rain would then fall, fertilizing the earth, renewing life. This was not a final battle. It was endless, recurring, mirroring the cycles of drought and storm, life and death, order and chaos. The Slavs saw their world not as a war to be won, but as a balance to be maintained. Perun and Veles were not enemies in the modern sense. They were necessary opposites, each defining and sustaining the other. Sapkowski never names Perun or Veles outright, but their shadow permeates his world. The Witcher's universe is one of tension between law and chaos, order and wildness, civilization and the deep, untamed forces of nature. Geralt himself walks this line. He is bound by contracts, codes and professional neutrality, echoes of Perun's order. But he also navigates the chaos of magic, prophecy and monsters born from wild primal forces, echoes of Veles. He is both lightning strike and serpent, both law and trickery. Monsters like the Leshys embody Veles's chaos, spirits of the wild resisting human domination. Sorcerers and kings invoke Perun's order, imposing law and structure, yet often with arrogance that leads to destruction. The Witcher's world lives in this tension. Reflecting the ancient Slavic truth, there is no victory of order over chaos, only a fragile balance. In psychological terms, Perun and Veles represent two poles of the human psyche. Perun is the conscious mind, the ego's need for clarity, structure and control. Veles is the unconscious, the shadow, the instinctual depths, the place where desire and fear mingle. Their struggle is not external, it is within us. When Veles rises, chaos floods our lives. Repressed emotions break through, instincts overwhelm us, old wounds resurface. Perun responds with thunder, the rational mind trying to restore order, striking down the serpent of the unconscious. But just as in myth, the battle is never final. The unconscious cannot be destroyed. It can only be confronted, acknowledged, integrated. This is why the Perun-Veles myth is so profound. It does not promise resolution, it promises rhythm. Life is not a war to end, it is a cycle to endure. When Christianity came to Slavic lands, the myth was reshaped. Perun's role as sky god was absorbed into the Christian image of God. Veles, once ambivalent and necessary, was demonized, turned into the devil. The ancient balance became a moral war of good against evil. But in The Witcher, Sapkowski revives the older vision. His world resists the binary of pure light and darkness. Monsters are not satanic forces. Sorcerers are not holy saints. Instead, the world reflects the pagan rhythm. Forces collide, balance must be negotiated, and human beings must learn to live in the tension. We might imagine ourselves far removed from myths of thunder gods and serpents. But the Perun-Veles conflict still plays out in our lives. Every time we seek control over the chaos of our emotions, we are enacting Perun's thunder against Veles's serpent. Every time we surrender to instinct, to grief, to the unpredictable currents of life, Veles rises again. The balance is never stable. Too much order, and life becomes rigid, suffocating. Too much chaos, and it dissolves into madness. The myth teaches us that wisdom lies not in victory but in balance. And this is exactly what The Witcher shows us. Geralt's world is not one where evil can be destroyed forever. It is one where choices must be made, consequences endured, and balance sought anew again and again. Just like the thunderstorm that returns each season, just like the serpent that always climbs again, so too do our shadows and struggles return. In the end, Perun and Veles are not just gods of an ancient people. They are the twin truths of existence, order and chaos, sky and underworld, lightning and serpent. They live within us. And if we forget that, if we try to deny one or worship only the other, the balance collapses. The Witcher, in its brutal honesty, reminds us of what the Slavs always knew. The storm will always come, the serpent will always rise, and our task is not to destroy one or the other, but to live in the endless rhythm of their dance. Every myth lives in tension with history. The stories we inherit are not only shaped by imagination, they are also shaped by power. And in Eastern Europe, few events reshaped myth as profoundly as the coming of Christianity. Before Christianity, Slavic peoples lived in a world alive with spirits. Forests held the Leshys, rivers whispered with Rusalki, fields shimmered with noon wraiths. The thunder above was Perun's weapon. The serpent below was Veles' breath. Rituals honored these forces, offerings of bread, milk, mead, even animal sacrifice. Life was woven into cycles of nature and myth. But with Christianization came a new framework. The old gods and spirits did not disappear overnight. They were too deeply rooted in memory. Instead, they were rebranded, demonized, buried beneath new names. Perun, once the thunder god, was absorbed into the image of the Christian god, his thunderbolts now framed as divine judgment. Veles, the serpent of the underworld, was cast down as the devil. The balance between order and chaos became a moral war of good against evil. The household spirits, the domovoi, once guardians of the hearth, were reimagined as mischievous or demonic forces. The Rusalka, once a tragic spirit of drowned maidens, became a temptress demon luring men to their damnation. The Leshys, once a guardian of the forest, was cast as a devil leading souls astray. The subtlety of myth, its balance and ambivalence, was flattened. Where once the forest was sacred and dangerous, it was now a haunt of demons. Where once spirits were warnings or guides, they were now seen as snares of Satan. And yet the myths did not die. They slipped into folk tales, fairy tales, lullabies whispered to children. Grandmothers still told stories of the Rusalka at the river. Farmers still left offerings in the fields, even if they called them blessings to saints. In truth, the old gods lived on beneath the Christian surface. Anthropologists call this syncretism, the blending of belief systems. In Slavic lands, saints often took on the roles of old deities. Saint Elijah carried echoes of Perun's thunder. Saint Nicholas took over roles once linked to Veles as a patron of cattle and wealth. Christian feast days aligned with pagan festivals, allowing the rhythms of the old world to continue under new names. But something was lost. The richness of ambiguity, the acknowledgement that chaos was as necessary as order, gave way to binaries. Spirits that once taught balance were recast as evil to be destroyed. Andrzej Sapkowski in The Witcher resurrects the older worldview. His world is one where spirits are not mere demons, but beings with stories, griefs, and reasons. His monsters are not evil incarnate, but consequences of human actions, remnants of old pacts with the land. In doing so, he restores the pagan subtlety that Christianity suppressed. His Leshys is not the devil, it is the forest itself. His Noonwraith is not a succubus, it is a memory of grief. His Striga is not a demon from hell, it is a cursed child. This restoration matters because it allows us to re-engage with truths that binary moral systems often hide. That life is grey, that suffering creates monsters, that nature resists domination, that balance, not victory, is the true aim of existence. In this sense, The Witcher is not only fantasy, it is counter-history. It whispers the voices that were silenced. It gives new life to the gods and spirits that were demonized. It reclaims what centuries of Christianization sought to bury. This is why the world of The Witcher feels so different from standard fantasy rooted in Western medieval tropes. In most of those tales, evil is absolute, the devil is clear, God is distant but real. In Sapkowski's world, there is no omnipotent deity, no ultimate devil. There are only forces, cycles, wounds, choices, The ambiguity of pagan myth returns in full force. But why should this matter to us, modern readers, centuries removed from both pagan Slavs and medieval conversion? Because the memory of myth is not only cultural, it is psychological. When the old stories were suppressed, something in us was silenced too. The part of us that understood that chaos has its place, that grief must be honored, that nature is alive, that monsters carry meaning. We inherited instead a binary world that struggles to account for ambiguity. And yet, the old stories return. They return in folk tales, in horror films, in fantasy novels. They return in The Witcher, because we need them. We need stories that tell us not everything is black and white, not every shadow is a devil, not every storm is punishment. We need stories that remind us that life is balance, not battle. When you read The Witcher, you are not only enjoying a fantasy saga, you are listening to buried memory. You are hearing the echo of grandmothers whispering about spirits by the fire, of farmers leaving offerings at tree stumps, of children warned not to stray into the woods at dusk. Christianization tried to bury those voices. Sapkowski dug them up, brushed off the dirt, and breathed life into them again. And when you feel that strange resonance, that eerie familiarity, as Geralt faces a Leshys or listens to a noon-wraith lament, it is not only because you are reading a good story, it is because the myth remembers you too. Why does The Witcher resonate so strongly today? Why do readers, gamers, and viewers across the world feel something ancient stir within them when Geralt enters the forest, when Ciri flees her destiny, when Yennefer confronts her scars? It would be easy to say it is because of good storytelling, compelling characters, or an exciting world. And that is true, but it is not the whole truth. The deeper reason lies in psychology, in the way myths speak to us at levels we do not consciously control. Carl Gustav Jung argued that humanity shares a collective unconscious, a reservoir of archetypes, symbols, and patterns that repeat across cultures and eras. Myths are not random stories. They are the psyche speaking to itself. They are the dream language of humanity, expressing fears, desires, and truths too deep for logic. When you dream of wandering in a dark forest, Jung would say you are encountering the archetype of the unconscious, the untamed, unknown part of yourself. When you dream of a monster, you are meeting your shadow, the repressed aspects of your psyche. When you dream of a guide, a child, or a witch, you are meeting archetypes that humanity has always known. This is why myths across the world echo one another. The Slavic Striga and the Greek Lamia are sisters. The Rusalka and the Celtic Banshee cry with the same grief. The Leshys and the Norse Jotun both embody the wildness of nature. Different cultures, different names, but the same archetypes. In The Witcher, these archetypes are alive. Geralt himself is the wounded healer, scarred by his mutations yet capable of healing the world through his liminal role. Yennefer is the witch, desired and feared, powerful and wounded, embodying the paradox of feminine power. Ciri is the child of destiny, innocent and terrifying, the bearer of both hope and destruction. The monsters too are archetypes of the shadow. The Striga is neglected rage, the Rusalka is grief given voice, the Noonwraith is exhaustion and loss, the Leshys is untamed wilderness. Each monster is not only external, but internal. Each one is us. When we read or watch these stories, we are not only entertained, we are participating in a symbolic ritual. We are confronting our own shadows through myth. We feel resonance because, at some level, the archetypes are already inside us. But why now? Why has The Witcher, rooted in Slavic myth, become a global phenomenon in the 21st century? One reason is that modern life has left us starved of myth. We live in a world of algorithms, economies, and endless distraction. We are taught to think rationally, to measure, to optimize. But the psyche does not live by numbers alone. It longs for stories, symbols, archetypes. Without them, we become unmoored. The Witcher fills this gap. It speaks in the language of myth, without pretending to offer easy answers. It acknowledges the grayness of the world, the ambiguity of morality, the inevitability of suffering. It is myth for the modern soul, unsentimental, unromantic, but still deeply archetypal. Another reason is that our time is marked by uncertainty. Climate crisis, political upheaval, technological disruption, these are our forests, our storms, our chaos serpents rising. In such a time, stories that deal honestly with fear, ambiguity, and resilience resonate more deeply than tales of clear heroes and villains. The Witcher offers no final victory, only the endurance of Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri as they navigate a broken world. And that feels true. In today's world, the archetypes of the Witcher offer medicine. The Outsider, Geralt. For those who feel alienated in a fragmented society, Geralt shows that exile can carry power, that wounds can give perspective. The Witch, Yennefer. For those scarred by longing or denial, Yennefer shows that strength and vulnerability coexist. The Child of Destiny, Ciri. For a generation burdened by crises not of their making, Ciri shows both the terror and the hope of carrying the future. The monsters, Striga, Rusalki, Noonwraith. For all of us, they show that our shadows cannot be ignored. What we bury returns. What we repress grows claws. These archetypes remind us that our struggles are not only personal but universal. We are not alone in our exile, our grief, our burdens. Humanity has faced these truths before, and we still whisper them to ourselves through story. When Christianity suppressed the old myths, it sought to erase ambiguity, to make the world a war between good and evil. Today, secular rationalism can repeat the mistake in a different form, flattening human experience into data, treating suffering as mere pathology, dismissing myth as superstition. But myth is not superstition. It is survival. It is the psyche's way of mapping the darkness. Without it, we are blind in the forest. This is why the Witcher returns now, because beneath all our science and progress, we are still human. We still dream of monsters. We still long for guides. We still fear the shadow. And so Sapkowski's world, filled with Strigas and Rusalki, sorceresses and cursed children, speaks not only to nostalgia for folklore, but to our deepest modern needs. It gives us language for what we feel but cannot articulate. It gives us ritual in the form of story. The Witcher is not just entertainment. It is myth reborn, disguised in swords and sorcery. It is a mirror of the collective unconscious, reminding us of the truths we would rather ignore. That life is ambiguous, that suffering shapes us, that monsters are often wounds in disguise. And perhaps this is why the world responds so strongly to Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri. Not because we want another fantasy hero, but because we need stories that tell the truth, that survival is messy, that love is complicated, that destiny is both burden and gift, and that our shadows are inseparable from who we are. In the end, Jung was right. Myths are dreams of the collective unconscious, and the Witcher is one of our dreams made flesh. It returns to us now because we need it, because without myth, we are lost in the forest. We have walked through forests haunted by spirits. We have met drowned maidens and cursed children. We have stood beneath the thunder of Perun and felt the serpent of Veles rising. We have followed Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri through exile, longing, and destiny. And now we arrive at the final truth. Myths do not exist to tell us about gods or monsters. They exist to tell us about ourselves. It is tempting to believe that monsters are outside us, that they lurk in the woods, or in the dark, or in other people. But myth and the Witcher whisper a harder truth. The monsters are born of us. The Striga is not a demon from another realm. She is the neglected child, the wound of cruelty that grows teeth. The Rusalki is not a fairy tale villain. She is betrayal, grief drowned and reborn with a haunting song. The Upir is not an alien horror. He is injustice that refuses to stay buried. The Leshys is not only a beast of bark and claw, he is nature itself, rising to remind us that we are not its masters. The Noon Wraith is not only a shimmering ghost, she is exhaustion, loss, the cost of forgetting our limits. Every monster is a mirror. Every shadow is a reflection. When you fear them, you are fearing yourself. Sapkowski's genius lies in refusing to give us comfort. In other fantasy worlds, monsters are slain and evil is banished. But in The Witcher, victory is never clean. Curses are broken, yes, but scars remain. Choices are made, but every choice wounds. Geralt cannot save everyone. Yennefer cannot heal every loss. Ciri cannot escape her destiny. This is not cynicism, it is honesty. It is the truth that myths have always carried. Life is not about erasing shadows, but learning to live with them. Philosophically, The Witcher's world resonates with existentialism. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that we are condemned to be free, forced to choose without certainty, without divine guarantees. Albert Camus wrote of the absurd, the gap between our longing for meaning and the silence of the universe. This is the same silence we hear in The Witcher. The gods do not speak, destiny is unclear, the world is grey, and yet we must choose. Geralt must decide whom to save. Yennefer must decide whether to pursue power or love. Ciri must decide what kind of future she will carry. So must we. The forest of myth is our own existence. The monsters are our own shadows. The choices are ours alone. And like Geralt, we will often emerge scarred, uncertain, haunted. But here is where myth offers its paradoxical gift. Myths do not erase suffering. They give it shape. They tell us, you are not alone in this. Others have walked the forest before you. Others have faced shadows. Others have felt exile, longing, betrayal, destiny. The Witcher's power lies in resurrecting this truth. By dressing old Slavic myths in modern garb, Sapkowski allows us to feel their resonance again. We see that our struggles are ancient, that our pain is archetypal, that our monsters are timeless. And so we come to you. What are the monsters that haunt your life? Is it the Striga, the wound of childhood pain, snarling in the dark? Is it the Rusalki, the grief of love betrayed, singing in the waters of memory? Is it the Upir, the injustice you cannot forget, clawing its way back into your thoughts? Is it the Leshys, the wild part of yourself, untamed and dangerous, that resists control? Is it the Noon Wraith, the exhaustion of a life stretched too thin, shimmering with sorrow in the fields of your days? These are not distant myths. They are your shadows, and like Geralt, you cannot simply slay them. You must face them, listen to them, learn from them. Sometimes you must have mercy on them. So what does Slavic myth, filtered through The Witcher, tell us about ourselves? That we are wounded, and yet our wounds carry meaning. That we are exiled, and yet in exile we find vision. That we are haunted by monsters, and yet the monsters are our own truths, returned to us in a form we cannot ignore. The forest is calling, the shadows are waiting, the myths are whispering, and the choice is yours. Will you deny the monsters, bury them deeper, pretend the forest does not exist, or will you step into the trees, sword in hand, and face the truths that have always lived within you? Because in the end, The Witcher is not fantasy, it is memory, it is myth reborn. And its final lesson is simple but unyielding. Your monsters are not accidents, they are messages, and they are speaking to you. Good night.